The proclamation of the Holy Gospel according to Mark. As Jesus was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a sizable crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind man, the son of Timaeus, sat by the roadside begging. On hearing that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me." And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he kept calling out all the more, "Son of David, have pity on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take courage, get up, Jesus is calling you." He threw aside his cloak, sprang up, and came to Jesus. Jesus said to him in reply, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man replied to him, "Master, I want to see." Jesus told him, "Go your way, your faith has saved you." Immediately he received his sight and followed him on the way. The Gospel of the Lord.
Our Gospel for this Sunday comes from the 10th chapter of St. Mark. We have been reflecting on the compassion of God and how we should receive the compassion of God in faith. In the first reading, we find Jeremiah having this vision of Ephraim being restored by a compassionate father, back home, being restored, and the images of the blind, the lame, the mothers, and the children joining this whole caravan of joy, being guided by God, shows us how God is really compassionate, offering new life to His children. And in the second reading from the letter to the Hebrews, we find the figure of Jesus, the high priest, who became a compassionate high priest because He became incarnate. He experienced our weaknesses and our temptations. And because of His compassion, He can intercede for us with the Father. He is our representative before the Father, praying for us, begging the Father to be merciful to us. In the Gospel, we find the compassion of God in Jesus Christ narrated in the healing of Bartimaeus, the blind man, the son of Timaeus. Jesus was passing by, and there was a sizable crowd. But when Bartimaeus heard that it was Jesus that was passing by, something in his heart was triggered. He cried out, "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me." Now this is interesting. The blind person saw something in Jesus. Deep in his heart, he saw that Jesus could be compassionate. Deep in his heart, he saw that someone could turn to Jesus, could appeal to Jesus, and could receive pity, compassion. Now, of course, the crowds stopped this man. "You do not disturb the teacher. Do not meddle with the teacher." But all the more he cried out, all the more he expressed his faith in this person that he could not physically see. But deep in his heart, he saw, you could rely on this compassionate Son of David. So he cried out all the more, "Have pity on me." And Jesus allowed this man to come to him. And there was a change of heart in the crowds. They told him, "Have no fear, have no fear. He is calling you to Himself." And look at this compassionate Jesus. He asked the blind man, "What do you want me to do for you?" Look at the compassion of God. The Son of God, according to the letter to the Hebrews, this eternal Son of God comes and asks this blind man, What can I do for you? He becomes the servant of this blind person. Look at these depths of compassion. The Son of God really lowering himself, really emptying himself, and being the slave, the servant of this suffering blind man. What do you want me to do for you? And the blind man says, Lord, restore my sight. I want to see. And Jesus said, be on your way. Your faith has healed you. The compassion of God in Jesus Christ, the humble compassion of God, was matched by the faith of Bartimaeus. Brothers and sisters, we all ask God, we all clamor for God's compassion. But will He find faith? The type of faith that Bartimaeus exhibited. Do we see? Do we trust? Do we see with the eyes of faith that Jesus is really capable of healing us, of entering our world, understanding us? And do we put our trust in Him? The compassion of God needs the corresponding faith that emanates from our hearts. Now, many of us will say, yes, I believe in Jesus. That's why I turn to Him to be merciful to me. But look, in the Gospel, after being restored to sight, Bartimaeus, according to this account, followed Jesus up the road. He expressed his faith by being a disciple of Christ. He followed Jesus. Aha! It is one thing to beg the Lord to be compassionate to us, but it is another thing to follow Jesus after experiencing His compassionate love. Many times, we beg the Lord to have pity on us, and after experiencing God's compassion, we rejoice, we say thank you, but do we follow Him? Do we follow Him? Do we become more and more His disciples? Faith and gratitude to the compassionate Lord is seen in discipleship. Just like Bartimaeus, it's not enough to ask for mercy. It is not enough to say, I believe, Lord. My gratitude is shown in a life of discipleship. So, my dear brothers and sisters, today let us recall the times the Lord has heard our cries, and the Lord always turns to us as our brother, our compassionate high priest, and represents us before the Father, who restores us. Recall those moments. And did those moments lead us to deeper faith and a deeper following of Christ as disciples? Has our lives changed because God has been compassionate to us? Or business as usual? No change at all. Even with the many times, Jesus has been compassionate to us. Let us not waste God's compassion to us. Let us receive it in faith and in a life of discipleship. I recall a person who begged us for help. I was a young priest at that time. And so I said, the little that I can do to help, I will extend to him. Because I knew his background. His father left the family when he was still small. Periodically, the father would send some amount of money for their sustenance, but that was not regular. So this boy was looking for a father, having been abandoned by the father. So we tried to help him, and I invited some priests and seminarians to pitch in, so that he could go to school. And he was able to complete high school and later on college. He struggled through it. He did not pass the board exam the first time he took it in engineering. But he constantly begged God for mercy. Early morning, you would see him in the chapel praying hard. And one fine day, he got employed, even if he was underboard. And then he passed the board exam. He came back to us, filled with gratitude, singing the praises of a compassionate God that showed His love through neighbors, compassionate neighbors. But one thing that I'll never forget is this. He said, "Father, for as long as I live and for as long as I am earning, I will always remember the church and the poor." The poor. I have benefited from the compassion of the church. I will let other people experience the compassion of God through me. Wow, that's it. Receive the compassion of God in faith and in discipleship. The word has been exposed. Let us now fulfill it.